Hi, this is Tempter Podcast, where we discuss embedded Linux, IoT development, and anything else we might find interesting. And this is your host, Kim, with Cliff. And today we have a new guest with us, Andrew Wafaa. Andy is with 20 years of experience in open source in a variety of business sectors. Andrew currently works for Arm Limited, where he's head of their open source office, and also looks after engagements with open source software communities. He has held many roles and still holds many of those roles in community entities. Currently serves as chair of Yocto Project Advisory Board and sits on the SEN Advisory Board, as well as a longtime partner of Linaro Technical Steering Council. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Cliff. Great to be here.
So, Andy, we are excited to have you here, and hopefully we'll learn a lot during this course of podcast. So tell us about yourself and your journey, where you are today, and what is keeping you busy these days.
Okay, yeah. As you mentioned in my intro, I've been involved in open source in one shape or another for 2 decades. It started off purely out of curiosity as a user. I was working in the aviation industry pre 9/11, and it was just a hobby, tinker around. It's all fun and games. My brother-in-law was into tech, and he suggested, look at this Linux thing. It's new, it's upcoming, it's shiny, it seems quite cool, so I gave it a whirl. And after September the 11th, the aviation industry, unsurprisingly, took a bit of a nosedive. So I was like, okay, it's time to pull the chute out of my current gig. Let's go into something else. What am I going to go into? And I decided to choose IT. And I ended up putting myself through Red Hat's training, got a job with one of the local government support teams, and I kind of worked my way up from desktop support. I went from there to working at Sun, again doing support. Whilst I was at Sun, I was focused on Linux, whilst everyone else was worrying about Solaris. And that was a real easy gig for me because a lot of the Sun Linux customers were really switched on. They knew their stuff inside and out. They were teaching me stuff, which is great. And so, they call up going, yeah, I've got this issue, got a dead hard drive or whatever else. Can you send me a hard drive? The logs are uploaded already to this place or that place, whatever else and whatnot. So it was real easy click, click, click. And so my performance looked really good. I'm closing all these support tickets and everyone else is kind of on their first one and I've closed 4. So that was great. That was nice and easy. I then moved into more of a sysadmin role down in London. So I'm based about 110, 120 miles north of London in the UK. So I was there commuting by train each day into London. Worked my way up through, doing the whole sysadmin thing, data center admin, then moved across to a consultancy firm that got bought by EMC. I was doing virtualization work there. I then moved over to Fujitsu from EMC, handling a lot of Linux stuff for a variety of different customers, both financial and governmental. And then from Fujitsu, I came to Arm, where I've been for the last 9 years. 8.5 years, something like that. And, I've held a few different roles within Arm. And, currently I head up the open source office, which is great because I think open source is a bit of a passion of mine. So I'm able to bring my passion to work, which makes the whole work balance thing much easier. I can grit my teeth and be a bit happy when things aren't going great. So that's always good. But yeah, my first real contribution to open source was appreciate it's a bit of a cliche, but I was scratching my own itch. I don't know if you remember, but back in the day with Novell, Nat Friedman started up a project called Hula, which was a email and calendaring app. It was before this whole JavaScript thing took off, and it was really neat, really lightweight, really cool. And I wanted to run my own email server. I thought, well, what better tool to use, right? So I played around, started getting it all there, and I was like, you know what? I hate running things from tarballs. I like neat packaged software, right? If I want to get rid of it, I can RPM-E or depackage, remove whatever else. It's all handled for me, and then it leaves a nice clean system. I don't have cruft hanging around. So, okay, first thing I did was I packaged up Hula. And I thought, well, okay, this is all open source and I'm supposed to give back kind of thing. And, I was getting my head around the whole how you contribute back to open source at the time. And so I was like, okay, well, now that I've got an email server up and running, let's get the web server up and running, create the web server, and I hosted my RPMs that I created. And that was picked up by some of the project guys over at Novell, and they reached out to me and said, would you mind doing this properly and through web panels? I'm like, sure, tell me what to do and I'm happy to, kind of thing. And so that's when I started my real love affair, real partnership with a lot of the SUSE guys. It was SUSE was my first Linux distro. Even though I put myself through the Red Hat training, I used SUSE personally. And so I got in and knew and met a lot of these guys over at Novell and at SUSE, and I still count many of them as, good personal friends to this day. So that's kind of how I started my involvement in open source, using it and contributing it, and it grew from there.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, you have had a wide variety of experiences, and I think the journey that started off, doing other things ended up in open source. And I think, that's actually how it happens. And scratch your own itch is actually so cliche but so real that a lot of developers we talk to, they have a similar kind of story where they would go and make some change that they didn't intend to because they had to get something going or they are interested in it, and then they get pulled in. And so that's great. So I think you described how you got into open source, and your contributions. So what were like some of the challenges that you ran through, and then how you see that how the occasional contributor can become a regular contributor, and then maybe get deeper into the project, and maybe maintain certain portion of the project. So walk us through that in your experience, how that has.
So yeah, I mean, as I said, I kind of taught myself how to package, and it worked. At least to my eyes, it worked fine. I could get this email server up and running. I could use the calendaring function, all that sort of jazz. So that was all good. But I was kind of self-taught, and I'm fairly stereotypical. I don't really read the docs. I kind of look and go, yeah, okay, I'm bored now. I'll work it out as I go along, and then I may refer back or whatever else. So of course the corners cut and all sorts of things going on. And so when, the project guys reached out to me and said, can you do this properly? I'm like, yeah, sure. Tell me what to do. I'm like, okay, share this file with me. Okay, so I share the file, the spec file, whatever else. Okay, right. You need to make sure that this is done that way or this is done that way. Here's an example of what I mean, kind of thing. All right, okay. And so I'd then go back, take on board all the feedback that I've had, make the changes, and then, send them the spec file back again. And he's like, yeah, no, you're almost there, not quite. How about this? The formatting needs to be like this. What's your white space? What's your return? All that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the whole Vim versus Emacs thing here, don't worry. So, but yeah, and so it started off like that, and so with each distro release, I would create new packages, and I'm practicing a bit more and doing it that way. And this was just before the open build service came about, and I was one of the early public people that was accessing the open build service, and so I was able to really get a handle on it, and I was getting quite comfortable. I was able to create packages for multiple distros, multiple releases, and so I'm making a reasonable contribution to the project, whatever else. Unfortunately, Hula got killed off. By that time, I'd already made connections with various people within, the SUSE community, whatever else, and so I wanted to help out. And so one of the things was I became part of the GNOME team for OpenSUSE. It was a semi-official thing, but it was all community led. Yes, there were employees in there from SUSE, etc., and whatnot, but for the most part, they were just GNOME users, the same as everyone else, and contributors. And so I started getting more active in the goings on within the distro, and so soon enough, little did I know, I was kind of, I wouldn't say in a position of power, but I was able to influence things reasonably well. I then, it was kind of around the time of Moblin and MeeGo from Intel and Nokia,
right?
Which was a GNOME-based, really cool-looking, cut down UI for small form factor things, tablets, and the Asus EPC, I think it was, or whatever. I thought that was kind of cool. Upstream MeeGo they were using a weird homegrown kind of Linux base. And so I was like, I like the way OpenSUSE works. I'm comfortable with it. I understand all the command line tooling and all that sort of jazz. So I thought, what? I like the UI. I'll take the UI off of MeeGo and I'll put it on top of an OpenSUSE base. And I started playing with that. It was kind of just for giggles more than anything else. Around that time, Nat Friedman created what was known as SUSE Studio at the time, an easy way of building installable images, whether it be for VMs or hard drives, USB drives, and whatever else. So I was a beta tester for him on that. And so I started building this, effectively a quasi-fork of both OpenSUSE and MeeGo. And as it turned out, at about that, I got something up and running. At about that time, SUSE started looking at it commercially. And so they used a lot of what I'd done in my spare time in their commercial products. And I had these really switched on engineers asking me for tips, tricks, hints, them feeding back into me suggestions of, maybe if you did this way or whatever else. And so this whole collaborative thing kicked off, and it was great. I got a real buzz out of it. This is literally just something for me messing around in my spare time, and I've got a company actually talking to me about it. So that was great. But yeah, there's a lot of people that think, this is just for me. Nobody else is going to care about it. And that's exactly what I did with MeeGo. I was speaking to a friend over at Fedora who was kind of thinking the same sort of thing. He knows Fedora inside and out. He likes the look of this UI. What does he do? How does he go about it? So I was there helping him, and and that's led to another long, fruitful friendship. But yeah, it was literally, I got given an EPC. It's a 7-inch laptop. You're not going to do a huge amount on it, but this UI was designed specifically for that kind of form factor. I thought, well, it'd be cool to mess around with. So I did it literally just to keep myself amused, keep myself happy, stretch my technical prowess a little bit, kind of push myself. Can I do this? Can I do that? And to be honest, I never actually thought once whether anybody would think it would be useful. I didn't care.
Yeah.
It was just fun. And I think too many people nowadays are concerned about what others will think of what they've done. I think, this is part of the whole social media kind of TikTok, Instagram generation or mentality, if you will, of, everything's on show. Oh, I can't do anything. Somebody will critique me. They can critique me as much as they want. I don't care because I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me.
Yeah.
But there is a double-edged sword in that somebody will find that, okay, what you're doing is really cool and they find it useful as well. Oh, but it'd be even more useful for them if you did this or did that. And then they expect you to, they're expecting some weird SLA where you're going to deliver a fix or an update within 3 hours. It's like, dude, I'm spending an hour a week maybe on this when I, find that I'm struggling to sleep at night and I've woken up and I just need something to clear my head so I can go back to sleep. So I spent an hour at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the expectation, and I think some people are concerned of that expectation of, well, if this does get some, the hell am I going to do? How am I going to cope with it? Don't worry about it. You'll work it out when you get there. I think too many people try and plan too far in advance, especially when it's doing project. If you're doing something for you, keep doing it for you. And if others genuinely find it useful, they'll ask, do you mind if we help out? Can we look at having this in a week's time or something? Start talking about how can you collaborate together? How can you involve other people in making the change that everyone wants?
Yeah, that's a great insight, actually. And I was listening, and then I saw that you described how someone helped you hold your hand and get these spec files and everything sorted out, and then it came to a point where you were helping others. So
absolutely,
it's a full circle, and that's a great story, actually. You have been involved in many communities, and we'll come back to the ones that you work today. But you also have worked on open source from a administration point of view, and so what do you see? What are some of the ingredients, if you will, of a vibrant, successful community? Especially if you talk about success of Linux kernel, and then the distros around it, and maybe there were many things that gel together. But what's your take on it? Like, what would be a vibrant open source community, and what are some of the ingredients in your mind?
So I'll just say, for starters, that's a real hard question. Define a vibrant open source community. Ultimately, I think it kind of boils down to a safe, open, collaborative environment.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be unique personalities, accepting the fact that you're not going to please everyone. 'Cause as soon as you start trying to please everyone, you're going to please no one. So to get over that hump quick, right? Except some people will be upset, but that's fine. It's a matter of understanding how and why they're upset and trying to mitigate some of that as you move forward with the project, with different releases or whatever else, right? Mm-hmm. Some of those people won't get over the upsetness and they'll leave. Okay, it's a shame, but that's a natural growth of a project. So there's that. Time. A project that can magic time is a project that will go forever. The getting engagement from various time zones helps, gives that impression of limitless time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not confined to the 8 hours of Pacific time, but you'll get a couple of hours in Europe, you'll get a couple of hours in Asia, and then the rest, well, kind of deal with it, sort of thing. But I think having a diverse mindset as well in the community. Yes, people are going to will all have a common target or a common problem. That's why they're engaged in this project, right? But if you have a pile of yes people, you're not going to get challenged. You're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to expand or anything like that. You need to have some people that are going to go, yeah, that's great. But if we did it this way, we open up to a whole new opportunity or whatever else, right? Getting people from various backgrounds, both from a business perspective, from a technical perspective, and also from a personal perspective. A huge issue that I see on a daily basis, both within the wider community and also at work, is we're not a very diverse space, right? In so much as we really don't have enough women, enough people of color, etc. And it's really hard to get those people engaged. And one of the reasons is down to they've got no interest, right? It's seen as white guy territory, for whatever, right? There are some cultural differences. So, for instance, in China, there's a lot of female engineers in China, right? But that's probably an oddity. Maybe in India's not too badly represented in that space as well, but still, it's not where it should be. Certainly, over in the West, it's quite shocking, and I think open source is a platform that can enable better diversity in technology. Whether it be from a software perspective or a hardware perspective. There are open source hardware platforms cropping up now. So, you should be able to get more diversity from a technology perspective, utilizing open source.
One of the things I think is just a lot of people don't realize the opportunities that are out there. There's so much opportunity, and especially people from difficult backgrounds or disadvantaged situations. It's, they don't even know of the opportunities, and that's kind of the tragedy in many of these situations.
And actually, you kind of highlighted a point there, Cliff, of one of open source's traditional Achilles heels is marketing, right? Marketing takes a lot of time, effort, and crucially, money. So if you're a project of 1-2 people, unless that, one of those 2 people has a partner or a child that is doing a marketing major or something along those lines, you're going to be really hard pushed to do all the work that you do to try and get this project up and running, as well as advertise it. And that's one of the beauties of open source, is that it has this culture of events. You go across the world, there's numerous events. Granted, pre-COVID, it was much easier. Nowadays, most things are virtual, but events are a very easy way for you to market your project, right? Submit a paper, present, even if it's just a lightning talk, start building a bit of rapport there, whatever else. And next thing you know, you'll be beating people back that want to contribute and whatever else. But that's also quite a bit where, people like Red Hat, etc. Yes, they charge a lot of money, but one of the reasons is it's not just for support. They need to portion a large chunk of their funding into marketing. Yes, they're the leader in enterprise Linux, whatever else, but they still hammer home that message, with adverts on billboards, online, email blasts, whatever. They spend a lot of time and effort marketing. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest Achilles heels that open source has, is actually marketing, getting the word out. How do you engage with people in disadvantaged backgrounds or whatever else, how can you let them know, look, if you are interested in being the next NASA engineer, whether it be from a hardware or a software perspective, look, there's a hackerspace down the road, whatever else. There's this shared area that, like-minded people are going to. How do you get into some of the schools? Different education boards have different criteria. In my spare time, I'm a private pilot. And so I know from entity that in aviation, in general aviation, so AOPA, the Airline Aircraft Operators and Pilots Association, they have created a full syllabus for schools to take on to help teach a lot of the fundamental STEM requirements for the aviation industry, right? How can we do the same leveraging open source to grow the technology space? And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. And we've got a lot of big companies involved in open source. There's Comcast, Netflix, etc., who can help create video content, engaging content in one shape or another. There's, Amazon, there's hardware vendors. So in theory, if we all club together for the common good, we should be able to fix our shortcomings. Unfortunately, commercials get in the way sometimes, so we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, Andy, and I think it's the next part of collaborative evolution, probably, that might see cross organization collaborations around open source processes and technology, and maybe something like comes out for larger good. But I guess you rightly pointed out where we are and perhaps where we need to go. And so I think you've been, we come from an embedded background mainly, and we do things in enterprise, others occasionally. You come from the other way around, so you've started off at the enterprise desktop, and I think you've been involved in the distributions, Linux distribution, that is, which are more catering towards those areas. And I think if you look into the open source space and Linux, BSD, and all together, perhaps the desktop/server distributions are the ones that are mostly used. So we see that they have done something right, in terms of what they are offering. But embedded space is still fragmented, and there has been many things that has been happening in this space too. But how do you see, what would be something that, would be applicable to the embedded space from desktop/server space that could be beneficial?
So I think the biggest difference between the server space and the embedded space from a OS perspective is, if I just look at the Linux side of things, you've got multiple commercial vendors, Red Hat, SUSE, Canonical, all in the server space, right? And there's a couple of business models at play here. You've got the pure support side of things. So you can download it for free, you can run it for free, but if you want your updates and security fixes and all that sort of stuff, that's what you're paying for, right? You're paying a subscription for support. You're not paying a license for the software because it's open source. And then, there's aspects where, there's an element of consultancy that you're paying for. If you need things slightly customized or you need things tuned a little bit differently or whatever else, so you're paying for that rather than paying for the support or whatever, right? In the embedded space, there are multiple embedded OS vendors, but for whatever reason, they've not been able to have the same pull as the server space. You've got people like Wind River, Men's Graphics, and Monte Vista, etc. They all create their own OS. Most of the time, it's based on the Octo project. But for whatever reason, I don't know whether it's the support or the business model or whatever else, they've not been able to have the same gravitas as Red Hat or which kind of perpetuates this sort of fragmented view of the embedded space. Maybe because there are more proprietary vendors in the embedded space, it makes it harder. Whereas on the server space, it's either an open source platform, whether it be Linux or BSD, or it's Windows. You don't have the old Unix systems really anymore. Yes, okay, there's AIX, that's the last holdout. But that's getting quite niche now. That's predominantly for the IBM mainframes, Z series and stuff like that. Is that a reason why there's a big difference between embedded and server? I don't know. There's a definite difference in developer mentality. So developers that are coding for the enterprise space, the server space, whether it be for cloud native functions or whatever else, all the shiny new containery stuff, or the old monolithic or even the slightly newer but still quite old virtualized environments, versus a developer that's targeting a set-top box or something of that embedded ilk, there is a definite mind shift between these two groups of people. Even embedded developers that are writing more cloud native related things, they still think and act differently. Really bizarre seeing an embedded cloud native developer sitting next to a enterprise cloud native, server based cloud native developer. They could be miles apart for all intents and purposes, writing in different languages. They're all writing in Go or Rust or whatever. But it's the way they think, the way they act is different. It's very strange. But you kind of both mentioned BSD. I sit on the FreeBSD Foundation now, and I've been engaged with the FreeBSD community for many, many years. And they're a great bunch, and I actually love going to the FreeBSD events because it's a whole refreshing view and approach to things rather than the regular but lovely Linux community, right? The age of FreeBSD developers is actually not as old as you would think. There are some people that are there from day one, literally, the very first iteration out of Berkeley. But they're a real lovely bunch of people. Sometimes a little bit odd, but then again, so are the Linux folks. So it's all good. But their approach to things is very, very different. I would say FreeBSD is probably akin to Debian in the Linux space, right? It's a large open source operating system. There is no one commercial vendor behind it. There's lots of big players that are engaged and have a vested interest in ensuring that it continues. But I think the collaboration amongst commercial entities within FreeBSD is actually a little bit better than the way it works in Linux.
That's an interesting observation because usually I've heard people say that the BSD license or what have you allows you to not collaborate, and whereas the Linux community's license allows you to collaborate, or at least encourages you to collaborate, and maybe that's the reason. But that's interesting, that what your observations are, and I think it might be because communities have grown and understood the true value of collaboration, and they find it more refreshing and more free, irrespective of license. Or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think so. You're right. So FreeBSD is what's known as permissively licensed. So yes, you don't have to give back your changes that you've made. one of the things that the FreeBSD Foundation does do is try and encourage those that do consume FreeBSD to contribute back, try and engage with a lot of these people. Now, part of the issue of the permissive license is that it's difficult to say who is and who isn't using FreeBSD, right?
Yeah.
There's been a few times where the foundation was surprised, and even the FreeBSD community at large was surprised when, for instance, Sony with the PlayStation, somebody managed to get into the BIOS of the PlayStation 4. Oh, look, lo and behold, it's running FreeBSD, right? So that was a huge surprise to a lot of the community, and actually, as a result of that reverse engineering, traditional, real hacking for the greater good, if you will, in inverted commas, the FreeBSD Foundation community were able to engage with Sony much better. It opened up doors that weren't open to them beforehand. And they got Sony to engage in discussions on whether it be compilers or whatever else. And so there was a nice to and fro. Nintendo was outed a year or two ago with the Switch. That too is running on FreeBSD. You've got people like Netflix running FreeBSD. And one of the reasons why they're very engaged with FreeBSD is because the license allows them not to open source, they can keep certain things private whilst for the greater good. So things like, they've optimized the storage stack, for optimum throughput from disk to whatever. Network stacks have been optimized and whatever else. They can push all of that back upstream.
Yeah.
When it comes to things like codecs and things where motion picture association, those sort of people get very twitchy about and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. We keep that out of it, right? But everything else can be consumed by everyone. Everyone will benefit, not us, kind of thing. And I think that's a great way to use something like FreeBSD. It's not possible really with Linux because of the licensing. And so you've got another Unix compliant operating system that can do what you need it to do. Don't get me wrong, I've been using Linux for many, many years, and I'm a great supporter of it. But at the end of the day, it is a tool, know, and so pick the right tool for the right job. Preferably try and keep it open source if you can.
Yeah.
And so we see how things go there. But it's interesting. FreeBSD's making slow inroads into the embedded space, and I wonder whether it could actually potentially make good in the embedded space because of its permissive license. A lot of embedded vendors are kind of squirrely when it comes around to GPL and things like that.
Yeah.
And so having a platform that they can modify and they can choose what to give back and how to give back, that sort of thing, may actually be advantageous.
Certainly. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think Cliff agrees with it that, these are all tools to meet an end. And I think, we work on various things. Linux is one tool in the box. Sometimes you work on RTOSes, sometimes you write bare metal apps. You use one language or another language, and they're all tools. Many times we have this interesting discussions, but objectively, a cool software engineer just uses them as tools and see where they fit, and that's the smartness.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to see that BSD is still alive and kicking. I haven't used it a lot, but I was looking for a new router recently, and I discovered the pfSense project, which is based on BSD. So, there's examples of
absolutely
projects where it makes a lot of sense for security. The FreeBSD community is very much alive and kicking. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the foundation and I have to kind of thing. It genuinely is. It's because of its flexibility, it's used a lot in education. So people like University of Cambridge use FreeBSD as their
OS for their operating systems courses and things like that. So we're able to grow some new community members through that route, kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely. And there is an ecosystem around the BSD space. FreeBSD is one of many BSDs. It's probably the largest of the BSDs, but you've got people like NetBSD, which is very portable, and I've seen people run NetBSD on literally a toaster or a coffee machine because they can. Why not? You've got OpenBSD, which is very much security focused, and it was only recently that Linux admitted that the OpenBSD guys actually were quite sensible in how they mitigated some of the Spectrum meltdown issues that arose not that long ago. And so Linux has actually emulated what they've done in to an extent. So yeah, they are very much alive, kicking, growing, and they're a real welcoming community. And yeah, it's just fun to be engaged in both, seeing the two different kinds of people and whatnot. And yeah,
I remember the OpenBSD, the email where they said disable SMP. It's gonna get you in trouble, and that was a long time ago. And I was saying, well, here is another OpenBSD post, being scared of things that will never happen. And here you go, a few years later, it says, you were right.
Yeah, they've got a very, very accurate crystal ball.
Yes. So I literally was impressed, and I think I mentioned it to Cliff in past as well, that that was like a good call, and had the communities listened to it back then, maybe we would have done much better today. But yeah, we are where we are. So I think would you mind sharing some of the tips, like technical tips that you do in daily life for our listeners to be more productive?
Read the documentation. Genuinely. There's the 4-letter acronym of RTFM. That will save you a lot of time and effort. The problem is documentation takes various forms. It could just be a man page, that's your documentation, or it could be a text file hidden in some weird repo. That's probably my biggest tip. Take the time to read the documentation, right? From a application perspective, unfortunately, I've hit the heady heights of senior management at work now, so my time for hackery has gone by the wayside. So I'm becoming a lobotomized engineer. Things are leaving my brain faster than I can put them in there, unfortunately. From give it a go. Don't be scared of what other people are going to say about what you're doing. You're doing it for you, right? For those that are just starting out in open source, build up a portfolio, right? We've got the tools now like GitHub and GitLab that allow you to create effectively a portfolio just like artists do. They have this big folder of, look, I've done these portraits, I've done scenery, animals, whatever it is, right? You now have the ability to create a portfolio of, I've worked on container technologies, I work in the embedded space, I've worked on telco or 5G or whatever it may be, right? If you're young and you're just starting out and you're not sure, okay, what do I want to do? Try it all out. This is the beauty of open source, right? You can have a play. There's lots of ways that you can run that code just to see if it works. Get a Raspberry Pi, it's $35. You can do a load of stuff on that. There are multiple ways of getting access to different cloud servers for free, right? If you want to try it on something nice, big and beefy, there are ways. You just need to look for it. Don't be afraid to ask. You may find that when you do ask, somebody will be potentially short, rude, whatever else. Okay, not ideal, but don't let that put you off. Just ask again. Ask a few times, because you might find that somebody goes, oh, sorry, I wasn't really paying attention to the conversation that was going on. Yeah, ignore him. He's just a grumpy old so-and-so or whatever else. Or, what you're asking, she's best to answer that one or whatever. That sort of, somebody may wake up and realize that something like, keep asking. Don't be scared. And just ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're going to get involved in open source, just have fun. Yes, you can create a career out of it if you build up a nice portfolio. You go to an interview, you go, yeah, no, I've done this, 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 and this. Look, here you go, kind of thing, whatever. Oh, well, great, come on board. Have fun.
Yeah.
I still have fun to this day, 20 years later, kind of, I'm getting paid to do my hobby almost.
That's great.
Communities, different people. Yes, it's stressful at times. Crossing the road can be stressful at times. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. So I think some of our listeners might be also looking into, some of the technologies to start working on, or, some exciting stuff that's crossing the horizons in open source world. So any particular technology, hardware, software, or anything that interests you or is keeping you excited?
So I think my 3 software passions at the moment are predominantly operating systems or related to operating systems, right? So I've mentioned already FreeBSD. They're a great group of people. There's lots of resources for, if you want to learn about operating systems, whether it be embedded or not, look at FreeBSD. There's loads of educational material around that for you to get stuck in. There's the Yocto project, which is predominantly focused on embedded, but it's not solely embedded. We have various people that use Yocto for their data centers, right, for everything. That's a really powerful tool for building custom Linux distributions for a variety of different formats and platforms. And so you can get to grips with all sorts of aspects. And from the last one from an open source, from a OS perspective, is OpenSUSE. That's near and dear to my heart. And from a community, they're a great bunch of people. And an operating system or a distro is effectively a collection of multiple projects, right?
Yeah.
And so it just kind of integrates them all together. Getting involved in those projects, in operating systems, stuff like that, you end up getting exposed to a variety of different technologies, different languages. What are the differences between packaging a Rust application versus a Go application versus a C application, right? You start learning some of these nuances about the different languages, and you go, oh, actually, do you know what? That's really interesting, I'll dig a bit deeper. Oh, actually, that's a compiler problem. And then you start looking into compilers, and then you go off the deep end and you turn into some delightful person living in a basement working on compilers for the rest of your life, or whatever. Yeah. I think they're great ways of getting access to a variety of different technologies without too much trouble. And you could go where all the cool kids are and whatever else, which is in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, looking at all the container stuff. But one thing to bear in mind is, from a technology perspective, a lot of the stuff that's out there now is not new. Do not believe the hype. Containers have been around since the 60s. They were just called something different.
Right.
They were called LPARs, or they were called zones, or jails. Yeah. Exactly, right? None of it's new. Same with virtualization. It kind of goes round in circles, and give it a couple of years, there's going to be this new shiny thing. Oh, hang on a sec, guys. That Hewlett Packard do that back in the days, or wasn't that DEC or digital or whomever, think, oh yeah, no, that does sound kind of familiar. Yeah, but it's all shiny now. So right, okay. But yeah, there's lots of things. But like I say, working on from a distro perspective, you get to see these different things. You get to taste them. You get to try it out. You get to dig into the nitty gritty of it. That's where I would start personally. But that's kind of where I did start as well. So it's entirely up to you where you look at. But as I said before, just try and have fun. If you don't make it fun, you're not going to get anywhere.
Great. So I think it's a great advice that, look at platforms so you have a bigger venues to look into specifics later on you find interesting. And Andy listed a few of them here. That's really great. So any particular books, magazines, articles, or any podcasts, anything that you listen that you would like to recommend?
I listen to Bad Voltage. I know 2 out of the 3 very well. So I know John O'Bacon and Stuart Langridge pretty well. That's probably a good all-round kind of technology discussion. They dig into a variety of different things, and they have a laugh about it. They do have fun, and occasionally they have a live event where you can go and watch them record, and that's also an absolute blast. So I highly recommend.
Nice. Yeah, I think we have read the book from John O'Bacon probably last year, Cliff. You remember?
Yes.
On community building. He has really great insights into the psychology and then culture and how. Cliff, you have any final wrap-up thoughts and ask Andy about anything?
No, definitely been very interesting. It's fascinating to learn the history of computing because, like Andy said, a lot of it's not new. It kind of repeats, and understanding the history is really nice. So, yeah, I'm sure we could talk for hours here on all this since we've all been around for a bit. But yeah, appreciate all the ideas.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Andy. And you have a nice evening, and we'll talk again later.
Yep. Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.